fortunately, we are able to welcome you here again, here now, and give you the opportunity to also listen to what the German-Japanese Energy Transition Council is doing, and yes, what kind of activities the council is involved in, and also about German and Japanese energy policies currently. I very much welcome also our co-chairs. We have here Dr. Stefan Thomas, the co-chair on the German side. He is also the director of the Division of Energy, Transport and Climate at the Wuppertal Institute. And I also welcome Professor Terazawa, who is the co-chair on the Japanese side and chairman and CEO of the Institute of Energy Economics in Japan. And now, with no further ado, I would like to invite the two co-chairs to briefly give an explanation, a presentation of what the council is about, and then continue to highlight a little bit the current topics and the current challenges as well. Thank you.
Thank you a lot for the nice introduction, and very warm welcome also from me to our guests. Yeah, a few words about the German-Japanese Energy Transition Council, in case you didn't know it yet. It was founded in 2016, and we are meeting twice a year, so we could calculate. This is the 16th meeting that we have, and we consider it a role model for international cooperation on climate and energy issues. You can see here the group photos from I think the very first meeting, and from one of the hybrid meetings we had to do during the COVID-19 pandemic. Why do we consider ourselves as a role model? It is because we can go into much more depth than usual bilateral government cooperations in providing independent and science-based policy advice. As a consulting body, you see that at the bottom, through the studies and topical papers that we are developing, it's around 3 topics each year, and through stakeholder dialogues with industry and other stakeholders and civil society that also feed into our debates about these study topics, and also through outreach events. Our results are being presented once a year, but also we have other outreach events on the current topics of pathways or policies for the energy transition. So it's science-based input and consulting for policymakers. But then also we have 2 other streams of work. On the left-hand side, you see what we call Innovation Lab. It's stakeholder dialogues with young scientists who are invited to present their work, so that we can inform them about our work, but we can also learn from them what are emerging topics of research, and which could be issues also for us to discuss in our meetings and in our studies. And on the right-hand side, you see the Innovation Hub. Twice now we have organized innovation roundtables with industry companies, so as to also foster real cooperation between Japan and Germany in the initiation and development of joint demonstration projects on specific technologies. We have looked at thermoelectric generators in the first one, and on serial renovation of buildings in the second one. And yeah, hope there will be cooperation on the serial renovation will develop following the roundtable. GJETC receives its funding from the Ministries of Economic Affairs on both sides, which is the METI on the Japanese side and the BMWK on the German side. And we have secretariats, organizations supporting the work, including the coordination of the studies, which is the IEEJ on the Japanese side, and on the German side it's split between the Wuppertal Institute for the Scientific Secretariat and the ECOS Consult for the organization and consulting. We also have a principal advisor, Peter Hennecke, who used to be the co-chair at the beginning, together with his then counterpart, Professor Toyoda, and still supports us. Then you see that we have 8 more council members on the German side, some of whom were unfortunately not able to attend today, and 7 more on the Japanese side, who are all here except for one colleague. So that's some introduction about the GJETC and our work. And now some facts about upcoming work and challenges. What both countries could contribute to these recent recommendations from the COP28 about renewables, energy efficiency, and fossil fuels. So the recommendation was to triple renewable energy capacity globally and doubling the global average annual rate of energy efficiency improvements by 2030. And while transitioning away from fossil fuels in energy systems by 2050. So this is a global target, but still it is an opportunity for both countries to reassess our targets for renewables and energy efficiency. And so we could take a look, what can we domestically contribute to achieving these targets, while of course international efforts from both countries to support especially developing countries are needed in any case, for instance, through these joint energy, just energy transition partnerships. So for Germany, we find that we have the target to become greenhouse gas neutral by 2045 already. And if we achieve that target, then the transitioning away from fossil fuels is also included and would be achieved. For the renewables, we have a target of 600 terawatt hour of electricity production from renewables in 2030, which would be 80% of the estimated demand. But if we take 2022 as a base year, it's not clear which would be the base year in the COP decision. We had already 235 terawatt hours of production. So tripling this would mean 705. So even 94% of the estimated consumption. So we're already quite advanced, so that makes it difficult to reach that target domestically. On the other hand, if we look at renewables in total energy consumption, our rough target is 40% for 2030. And the base year was 18%. So tripling that would mean 54%. So here it is maybe difficult because the target of 40% is based on scenario analysis, maybe difficult to go beyond this target. If we look at capacity, next line, we would even need to have 67% of renewables in overall consumption in 2030, which would be beneficial for the climate, but even more difficult to achieve. On the other hand, energy efficiency, the worldwide doubling is 4% per year of increase in energy productivity. It is difficult for us to achieve. The historic average was just about 1 1% per year. We have strong energy efficiency targets anyway, so doubling that 1.1% would be feasible if we achieve the target, but 4% still would be very difficult to reach. So this is just an example of things that we are discussing here. And now I hand over to my co-chair, Tatsuya Terazawa, to talk about Japan and about some of the findings that we discussed here.
Well, I'll take the rest of the explanation. Stefan mentioned about the importance to improve energy efficiency. And as you can see from the left side graph, Japan and Germany are the two leaders in the world in improving energy intensity and energy efficiency. On the graph, UK has a lower figure, but it shows the difference in the industrial structure. UK is heavy on the service sector. So in terms of countries with substantial manufacturing capability, Germany and Japan are both the leaders in energy efficiency. But looking at our past record of improvement in energy intensity in Japan, if you have a look at the right side graph, the first upper side graph, it shows our improvement between 1971 and 1990. And especially after the first and second oil crisis, we've made a substantial improvement in energy intensity. But over 2 decades, from 1971 and 1990, the average annual improvement was about 1.8% every year. In the immediate years after the 2 oil crises, the percentage was about 2%. After that, between 1991 and 2010, our improvement just stopped. For nearly 20 years, we had almost zero improvement during that period of time. Then it comes 2011 towards 2022. In 2011, we had the Fukushima nuclear accident. And as a result, we had our own energy crisis. So we had to respond strongly by improving our energy efficiency and intensity. As a result, during that 2011 and 2022, we were able to achieve about a 2% improvement annually for that decade. Having said so, these, as you can see, in response to crisis in Japan, and remember, Japan has been the leader in energy efficiency. The record in response to crisis was about 2% annual improvement. But people talk about the COP28 pledge, doubling of energy intensity improvement. People may think, oh, doubling is easy. But the doubling is based on the doubling on the achievement that was made in 2022. 2022 was a special year facing energy crisis, and the global improvement for 2022 was 2%. Doubling is doubling from that level, a crisis response level 2% to 4%. The preceding years globally, before 2022, the annual improvement globally was around 1%. 1% to 2% facing that crisis. Now we are talking about 4%. And with all the determination, you may argue that 4% is possible, but the record for 2023, according to IEA, was just 1.3%. And this difference from the desired 4% and just taking 1.3%, the difference is 2.7%. It may appear small, but that's 1 year. If you keep it throughout this decade, the accumulated difference will be more than 20%. So if we continue to have this gap between our desired goal and the actual improvement, if we keep that throughout this decade, the difference would result in about 20% more energy demand. So that would show you the difficulty and the importance of improving energy intensity. Now, let me describe briefly about what GJETC has been studying in the past 1 year. And actually, we had the report of 3 joint researches, one on electricity market design, the second on the more effective governance of energy efficiency policies, and third was green industrial policy and the GX transformation. So these were the 3 reports which were discussed yesterday and today, and we had a very active discussion. We spent 7 hours yesterday and 3 hours today, so in total 10 hours. So I cannot summarize the discussion, but for those of you who have arrived, I'll try to do my best in briefly touching upon what was being discussed. Electricity market design. Why are we talking about electricity market design? The reason is that as we have the aspiration to triple the deployment of renewable energies, as a result, the power generated by renewable energies will have so much fluctuation. It was called intermittency. For electricity, you have to balance the demand and supply at any given second. So with the power generated by renewable energies going up and down, you need to have flexibility in the system. And we need to have the electricity market, which can enable the investment to enhance the necessary flexibility. And this is something that no country has been successful so far. So this is the reason why we touched upon this issue. We have found the approach of Japan and Germany to be very different. Japan's approach is focusing on having investment to ensure that we have sufficient dispatchable power. So the supply side approach is what Japan is focusing on. And as a result, we have already introduced our capacity market in 2020. And now we have a stronger version, which we call the long-term low carbon power auction system, for which we had the first auction this January. So we are moving ahead with policies to ensure that we will have the necessary investment to strengthen. We need to have the balance of power every moment. If we lose the balance, it goes up. Anyway, we have the capacity markets and the systems in place to ensure that we have dispatchable power. The Germany's approach seems to be focusing more on the demand side management as well as storage. So the approaches are, both approaches are possible, but the emphasis is being different between Germany and Japan. We had a discussion about remaining challenge. One is that this is beyond this market design, but as we introduce much more renewable energies and batteries for storage, it would result in a massive expansion for the demand for critical minerals, which would lead to another problem which must be addressed. And also, the percentage of renewable energies doesn't matter a lot. If we only have 10% of 20 or 20% of renewable energies, this intermittency issue is not that serious. But if you have 40%, 50%, 60%, or even 80%, which is the goal of Germany towards 2030, this challenge is substantial. So there was a discussion to deal with that 80% renewable energies, especially in Germany. It would require so much strengthened efforts, including a massive expansion of storage capabilities. So these are the challenges we face in the electricity market design. As we deploy more renewable energies, we need to have flexibility. The next is energy efficiency policy. I stressed how important and how difficult it is to improve energy efficiency. We compared the approaches of Germany and Japan, both the leaders in the world. We have found that Germany tends to prefer a network of organizations working together with voluntary commitments, whereas in Japan, we assign an expert on each plant level. So Japan's approach is much more on company specific, whereas Germany appears to be working as a network. The other approach, which became more clear today, is that Germany has much more focus on retrofitting the existing buildings. I'm impressed by the massiveness of subsidies provided to help retrofitting in Germany, and also many regulatory measures put into place. We don't have that in Japan. We have regulation to govern the construction of new buildings, but our regulation in Japan applying to existing buildings is not there. So Germany has a much stronger policy initiative towards retrofitting the existing buildings. Remaining challenges, we need to have a concrete roadmap. We have aspiration, but we need to have a roadmap. And also, as I stressed, we have been leaders in the world, but to get closer to this COP28 pledge, we have to do much, much more. So there's much more we have to do, and we have to learn from each other. And also looking at the organizations in each country. In Japan, METI, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, basically governs the whole spectrum of energy efficiency policies in Japan, whereas it appears in Germany, there are many, many players dealing with energy efficiency. So it may appear it may be less efficient in terms of governance, which could be a challenge for Germany. The final topic we touched upon was the Green Industrial Plan and the GX Transformation. GX Transformation stands for Green Transformation Policies. This is Japan's Green Industrial Policy. We have looked into these green industrial policies by Germany, Japan, USA, and China. And we have found that many countries are putting to so much resources to push for green industrial policies. And most countries are focusing on carrots, incentives, rather than sticks. That's our observation, comparing the efforts by those four players, Japan, Germany, USA, and China. We had some discussions. The first is that one pillar of the green industrial policy would have the introduction of carbon pricing. But we had a discussion, theoretically, maybe the carbon pricing should go as high as 800 euro per tons of CO2, theoretically. But there was a discussion, frankly, no industry can compete with that kind of high carbon pricing. So there was discussion that many policy tools must be mixed. We cannot just depend upon carbon pricing. And also there was a discussion that even if you have the best carbon pricing, that would only ensure level playing field within your region. It doesn't affect the global competition. So maybe you're okay within your region, but outside of region, it's a huge challenge. And also, we talked about if you put a label of green, would it allow you to do anything justified by being green? Like IRA in the US gives so much incentives to domestically produced EVs. Compared with the principle of WTO, it is inconsistent with the policy of WTO. Would that approach be permissible because it has the green label? And when we also have a discussion about CBAM, we understand that it is a measure to prevent carbon leakage, but it would certainly affect trade. Trade has been the largest engine of the global economic growth after World War II. So maybe we should have a discussion how to balance the legitimate global climate policy concerns with the need to have the expansion of trade. Two examples. The CBAM started with steel or aluminum limited sectors, but now it's proliferating. It covers bolts and screws, small items, it will go forever. How does it stand with the trade policy? The other is that CBAM applies to any country, even with the smallest amount of input. How would it affect the developing countries' aspiration to grow their trade? So I think these are the things that we should discuss. It's not to deny CBAM. CBAM has its legitimate purpose, but how you design CBAM would have to be put into a balance with the need to expand the global economy and trade. So these are discussions we've had. We don't have an answer, but these are discussions we've had. Finally, as you can see, hopefully from my explanation, that there is value of cooperation between Germany and Japan. Both Germany and Japan, as front runners, we have the joint responsibility to help stop global warming. And to make that happen, the third point is that there's a lot we can learn from each other. We are front runners, but we are not doing everything in a similar manner. We can learn a lot from each other. And also, I think we have had a very candid discussion yesterday and today, and providing sound, constructive advice, and we can learn from each other. As I said, the global climate issue is a global challenge. It's extremely challenging. We are front runners, but we have to do more. And that is the significance of having GJETC, where Germany and Japan will talk to each other, learn from each other, provide constructive advice to each other. So hopefully my explanation gave some aspects of GJETC. You didn't have to spend 10 hours, but I thank you for staying and listening to me for 10 minutes.
Well, thank you very much for the insights. And while I do have prepared a starter question, I invite all our guests to also, of course, raise your questions of your interest. We have guests from various organizations here. So it has been pointed out that the last Innovation Roundtable was on the building sector. So maybe you really already prepare your questions. And still, I would like to relate to the last slide that we see here and ask you, the two co-chairs now, what you can do or what we can do from both countries together to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to reach the reduction goals, and also to push for ambitious efforts worldwide.
We can be pioneers and leaders in technology and policy development. And we can also work together in some fields, such as supply chains of clean hydrogen, to build them up in coalitions of importing countries like ours and potential exporting countries to develop also fair production, and here certification of clean and sustainable hydrogen is also a field where we can work together, and that holds in many other technology fields where we could have joint developments based on the mutual exchange.
Okay. There are several areas in which Germany and Japan can work together. The first, the global climate issue is global. It is important for Germany and Japan to make the maximum improvement or reduction in the GHG emission. But frankly, Germany and Japan have only a very small percentage of the global GHG emission. So while we do our best to do even better between Germany and Japan, I think it is extremely important that we help other countries in our neighborhood to do much better. And frankly, Germany and Japan have done so much in energy efficiency. For example, the additional incremental improvement is becoming much more difficult. But many countries surrounding us, for Japan, it could be Southeast Asia, the room for improvement is huge. So we can share our technology, we can provide the finance so that our neighborhood countries, for us, Southeast Asia, for Germany, maybe East European countries or Africa, there's so much to be gained globally through our joint efforts in that regard. That's number one. Number two is that this issue of intermittency of renewable energies, this will become much, much more serious. But just as, especially Germany is a front runner in the introduction, deployment of renewable energies, Germany would face this issue earlier than many other countries. And by the way, Japan is not the front runner, not necessarily for renewable energies, but we face this problem already. On March 22nd of 2022, it was a cold day for late March, and unfortunately, it was cloudy. And the Tokyo region came very close to a blackout because of the shortage of power. One of the reasons is that because it was so cloudy, the 13 gigawatts of solar panels was basically worthless on a cloudy day. So this is a challenge of intermittency, depending upon weather. If it's fine, shiny, you have 13 gigawatts. If it's cloudy, 13 gigawatts, it's about 13 nuclear reactors are gone. This is the challenge of intermittency, and we need to have the system, including the market, to ensure that we have that flexibility to do this. And we need to have the technology for power storage as well. So both Germany and Japan can help the world to better address this intermittency by sharing and proposing better market design, better technology. And this is essential as we proceed with renewable energies. We have to do this. The third point is that, as I said, if we expand renewable energies and have more batteries, it would have a massive demand for critical minerals. First, we don't know if we have enough supply to meet the dramatic growth in the demand, number one. Number two, there's so much concentration in the supply of critical minerals today. So we have to make sure that we have a much more stronger expansion of supply, and we have to have diversification of the supply. That is exactly where I believe Germany and Japan can work together to expand the supply and enhance the diversity of the supply of critical minerals. So those are the three examples of what Germany and Japan can do. So in addition to learning from each other, providing advice as well, there's a lot we can do together for the two countries and for the world.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to welcome questions from the audience. Johanna Schilling is ready with a microphone, or do you just move around? And yes, if you have a questions, please raise your hand and we come along. And we would kindly like you to ask to say your name and also your affiliation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your nice talk. I'm Nergis Yunitchian from RLI Institute. And I have a question about this fact that you said that in Japan, the focus is on supply side and in Germany is on demand side and storage. Is there a conscious effort in expanding them to the other side, or would it make more financial sense for the countries to actually collaborate on that? Or how is the situation? Is it a conscious decision that these countries went towards this because of some other policies? Or is it that now you analyze it after it happened and you found that focus is different and the plan is going towards middle or sharing? Thank you.
Well, I emphasize the differences, but the reality is somewhere in between. I mentioned the policy support to expand the investment in dispatchable power supply. That would include low carbon hydrogen fired power generation, one example, but that would also include to help investment in batteries. So it's not just supply side, we do have batteries as well. But in terms of the scale, we believe that to deal with a massive intermittency, we have to start with means that is more trustworthy. And comparing supply side measures and demand side measures, supply side measures you can control. Demand side, it depends on different elements. So while we would be pursuing demand side measures, this is an urgent issue. So we have to start with a means that is more trustworthy, and that's supply side, including batteries. But we'll be looking into the demand side measures as well, including shifting the peak of the demand. So we have that in mind. But as I said, in terms of how much trust we can have in the effectiveness, we start with the supply side.
I'm afraid many people in Germany will also think that dispatchable power plants are more reliable than than batteries or demand, especially batteries on the demand side, like battery electric vehicles and heat pumps or the home energy storage that we see increasingly in Germany, combined with photovoltaic home systems. So this is why Germany also wants to now build 10 gigawatts of dispatchable power plants. The finding is that often the storage options, for instance, also heat storage in Germany, or aggregation of these millions of battery electric vehicles and so on that are existing anyway, may be much cheaper than the dispatchable power plants. So there's a lot of need for joint further research and exchange about good practice examples. And we know from previous work that Japan also has lots of excellent pilot projects on building energy management systems and using them as buildings and factories as flexibility sources. So it is probably in both countries then the debate in the scientific but also in the policy arena, which share of both types of technologies we should have in the future to provide the necessary flexibilities in the intermittent power supply and demand.
Yes, more questions are welcome. Okay, I see two hands raised.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Franz Lehner. I'm with NOW, the National Organization for Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technology here in Berlin. Relating to that question, is there a policy focus in Japan on decentralized power supply solutions versus more centralized ones, or is there no focus on either or, centralized or decentralized?
Well, I think it's not A or B. With the renewable energies expansion, it's clear that we would have to have much more distributed source of energy, for sure. But at the same time, to ensure the balance in the demand and supply, we need to have dispatchable power in scale. And that will require, in your terminology, centralized power source as well. And that is the reason why we are putting into place the capacity market, as well as much more strengthened version, which we call the long-term low carbon power auction system. And this system, for reference, provides the support for the capex for 20 years, so that that will incentivize companies to invest in dispatchable power as well as batteries.
There has been another question.
Thank you very much to both co-chairs to share the findings of the council. My name is Lisha Linzidler. I'm a PhD researcher from Kassel University. My research focus on the transformation of the petrochemical industry. And my question to you is, in your point of view, what is the best policy mix to guide the petrochemical industry through the energy crisis and currently a consolidation phase, and urge them to reach still carbon neutrality by 2045 or 2050? And another question is, do you see the possibility of global green lead market for green chemicals, let's say green construction chemicals, green fibers? Japan and Germany has been not only strong in engineering, but also in aesthetics and durability and high quality of products. Do you see the possibility of, pushing this from the market side, some products which are closer to consumers? So thank you very much.
A year ago, we had a study on the petrochemical industry. You may have seen it on our website. So we found that the technology pathways are a bit more diverse there than in the steel industry, which we also studied, where we found also to my astonishment that the targets and the technology pathways for the steel industry, from the major steel industry, steel manufacturers on both sides are very similar. It was a bit more diverse in the petrochemical industry, but clean imported feedstocks is a route that probably both would go. Chemical recycling of plastics is another avenue of potential feedstocks, and depending on scenarios, some see biomass as a potential more important source. And for the policies, I don't remember well, actually, so many studies. It's probably also in Germany we would use these carbon contracts for difference to allow for the difference between the cost of the cleaner feedstock or the more sustainable feedstocks and fossil fuels that have been used so far, like naphtha, or accelerated depreciations of investments. So typical instruments for the transformation in the industry sector, along also with carbon pricing. Here the EU will probably also use the CBAM mechanism. So
it's a huge headache for us. I talked about the improvement in energy efficiency or intensity, but it can consist of two elements. One is pure energy efficiency improvement, which is welcome, but the other is hollowing out of your industry, hollowing out the factories moving outside. And if you have a energy intensive industry leaving your region or country, that results in improvement in the energy intensity. Is this something that we should welcome it? It's a huge problem. With all the talks about CBAM, it only serves to protect the activities within your region. It doesn't affect the competition outside of your region. And then companies may decide to move out from EU to other countries. And if I'm not mistaken, with this Russian invasion of Ukraine and with the disruption of the supply of natural gas from Russia to Europe, many chemical companies using that natural gas from Russia had to get the natural gas somewhere, and some have chosen the USA with a vast amount of natural gas available to be the location to conduct their business. It is taking place in Japan, not as bad as in EU, but certainly this would put a competitive pressure on the petrochemical industry, which has been using a lot of energy and have been emitting CO2. But what would be the path for these people? I think, as you suggested, we have to make their process greener, but also their products greener as well. And we have to put into place a system to reward the greener products. And these industry can have a great role in providing greener products, including utilizing of carbon, CCU. In that regard, these companies could possibly be the leader in providing those green or greener products. And they can also be supplying various fuels, e-fuels produced from hydrogen to be used for various applications. So these companies, they have to be greener in their process, but they have to be greener in their products, and the policy would have to be put in place to reward their greener products. And that's the pathway for those companies, I think.
Thank you. I see another question coming up here.
Yes, my name is Olaf Böttcher, coming from the Federal Institute for Research on Building, Urban Affairs and Spatial Development. And first, I would like to say thank you for the brief introduction in your presentations. And then one question regarding the retrofitting of buildings in Japan. So mainly to Terazawa-san, I guess. You have mentioned in your presentation that their retrofitting of buildings is not playing a significant role in Japan, in difference to the German market. Fortunately, last year I could visit again Japan, and it was possible to see some successful projects for retrofitting of apartments and single-family houses. So maybe there's a development, a movement also in the Japanese market. Do you see something, or is it a niche product?
Well, I made a simple description to emphasize the difference, but you're right. We are taking measures to help retrofitting to improve energy efficiency. One of the typical example is that the government has provided lots of subsidy to incentivize households to make their houses more energy efficient. One simple way is to change the glasses to be more energy efficient, and that can improve the energy efficiency of existing houses. And many households have been using these supports to make their houses much more energy efficient. These are for individual residential houses. For apartments or condominiums, I think it's more challenging. This is something we discussed today. It goes to the ownership of those apartment buildings or condominiums. If you have owner and the tenants, the owner would have to pay for that retrofitting, but can he or she pass on that additional cost to the tenants? And I was impressed by the German system, which you may have a system that would help that that transfer of the cost to the tenants. But in Japan, we don't have that system. So the owners usually do not have so much of an incentive to invest in the retrofitting to improve their energy efficiency, unless he or she can pass on that cost to the tenant. And the policies taking place in Germany is something that I think we might look into with great interest. The other problem is that the other types of condominiums, we have a joint ownership. Each house has a certain portion of ownership of the whole building. And if you have a retrofitting affecting the whole building, it has to have the consensus of different owners. You have 20, 30, or 40 owners, and that's not easy. Some would argue that we should do retrofitting, but the others say, I don't want to pay for this. So that's the problem we have, and that's where I think we might be able to learn from the German experience, because Germany has been leading in this retrofitting, whereas in Japan, it's much more focused on the retrofitting of existing individual house rather than those condominiums.
Thank you very much. I think we still have time for 1 or 2 more questions, so you're welcome to raise your hand. Yes, once again.
Sorry, if there is no more question, I would like to ask what has been the most successful strategy in Japan and in Germany in transferring the knowledge or the products to the global level, to the countries that you said, okay, they also make contribution to the global climate change, but they might not be as ready to work with the situation. So between different options of helping the global level, what do you think is the most successful and what should we go towards?
I should start first. We have been working especially with our ASEAN friends, the Southeast Asian countries, and I think we have been very successful in helping them improve their energy efficiency. And how we have been successful for energy efficiency is basically technical assistance. Many of the policies or regulation, or including labeling, that have been successful and effective in Japan have been shared with our ASEAN countries through those technical assistance. And we have been inviting a lot of people from Southeast Asian countries to learn about our system, and also train many of them who would then be energy efficiency experts at each plant. Because you can have a general policy, which is very important, but you need to have energy efficiency experts who will look into every single plant to see rooms for improvement. And I think that has been successful. That's for energy efficiency. For power generation or transmission, that's require much more money. So financing would be the key challenge. And I think Japan has been very helpful. Japan has probably the second largest financing tools available after China in providing support for developed countries for their infrastructure investment, including power generation and transmission lines. And I think this would continue to be very important because these projects are very much capital intensive. So we would have to continue doing the support in that regard and probably doing more. Having said so, one of the difficult challenge is that transmission lines would have to be developed in those countries to better utilize renewable energies. As in Germany, the power generating region and the energy consuming region may be far apart. So you have to have transmission line. One example is Vietnam. They have so much potential for wind power generation in the southern part of Vietnam, and the demand is on the north. But for the widely known historical reasons, the transmission lines between North and South Vietnam is very weak. So they cannot utilize the renewable energies in the southern part of Vietnam. That would require transmission lines. But the problem with the transmission lines is that it takes so much time for the construction. And after completion of construction, the flow of electricity starts from a lower level and gradually goes up. So the cashback takes so much time, it's not conducive to the regular kind of financing. So that's one thing in which we have to be more creative in providing much more patient financing to deal with this long-term nature of transmission lines. And no country has been so successful in financing transmission lines. So far, the financing has been more successful in short-term projects such as solar parks, more effective. But for transmission lines, I think we are struggling, and that's where we have to work. And maybe that's an area in which Germany and Japan can work together.
Stefan, would you like to add?
Yeah, I agree that it's also the measures that Germany is taking. It's a combination of technical assistance and financial assistance, and it's it's important to discuss the needs with the countries, the emerging economies and developing countries, for it to be successful. We have colleagues working in real laboratories for transformation of urban systems, for instance, transport systems. And this is developed and implemented by the partners in these countries with the technical assistance from our colleagues. And also they facilitate mutual learning between different cities in India, in Africa, in South America. And they're also developing new technologies like electric three-wheelers for the last mile of goods transport, which could even in the end be transferred back or transferred to OECD countries and be novel, innovative solutions that we could also use. Sorry, I missed to talk about. We missed to talk about the green markets. We see some demand from auto manufacturers, car manufacturers for green steel. I'm not sure if that can be translated to the plastics petrochemicals market, but it is at least encouraging that there may be pioneering textile manufacturers or furniture manufacturers, whatever, who would be interested in green plastics.
Thank you, Stefan, also for adding further information on that issue. If there are no further questions, I would like to close this session by asking you one last question. Now that we have been working together, or now that you have been working together for some time, and also after 5 years for the first time, the Japanese council members have been able to come here to Berlin to meet on site. Last year we have been in Tokyo already, but now to you as co-chairs and as friends, what advice would you like to give your counterpart?
We at the German side always wonder if Japan will be able to restart its nuclear power plants as it aspires to, as a carbon neutral source of power. And also with, I think that the official strategy for 2050 still includes some fossil fuels and CCUS, and we heard that it's not yet perfectly clear whether this could all be achieved in a carbon neutral way. So I would strongly encourage our Japanese friends to consider whether, despite all problems we know about expanding renewable energies, whether that share could be increased quicker and to higher levels in the end for 2030 and 2050. Also using all your knowledge about flexibility, resources, and energy management.
Well, thank you very much for your kind advice. But for the interest for the visitors today, just to share some of the factual status of Japan's nuclear is that after the Fukushima nuclear accident in 2011, mainly as a result of the accident, 24 nuclear reactors were retired. And we still have 36 nuclear reactors remaining, out of which 3 are under construction. So we have 33 nuclear reactors already completed. And out of that 33, we have succeeded in restarting 12 nuclear reactors. There is a difference in view that some may be considering that the nuclear units are all stopped in Japan. It's not true. We have restarted 12, but you can also argue that that's out of the 33 remaining nuclear reactors. So it's like this glass, it's half full and half empty. That's the situation of nuclear in Japan. And maybe if I can give some humble advice to Germany is that going the order of the 3 topics we've discussed, talk about energy, excuse me, the first one was the design of the electricity market to deal with the intermittency. Germany's aspiration to improve, expand the percentage of renewable energies to 80% of your power mix is very, 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 very aggressive, which we respect. But from the discussion we had yesterday and today, I'm not quite sure if Germany has a well-established plan to deal with this massive intermittency, which is expected to be reached in 2030. So you have only 6 years to go. And whereas in Japan, the capacity market is already in place since 4 years ago, I've heard the capacity market in Germany will be put into place in 2028. So in terms of the speed and the scale to deal with this massive intermittency that will be expected to come as a result of this massive deployment of renewable energies, I think the preparation would have to be speed up and scale up to deal with this challenge. Second, about energy efficiency, I touched upon this in my presentation. As I said, in Japan, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, METI, governs all the aspects of energy efficiency policy. In Germany, there are many, many players dealing with energy efficiency. There are some benefits of having various players, but usually it's better to have a one single control tower doing energy efficiency policy because it is extremely important. So that is something, a frank, candid observation of the situation, the governance of energy efficiency policy in Germany. Third, about the green industrial policy. 2 points. One is that we heard that there was the debt break, which is affecting the money that could be spent from your budget. There's also the demand from the people to get a refund from their carbon pricing. Those constitutional budgetary constraint and the demand for the people to get the refund would result in a much lower, smaller policy support for the energy transformation, and which might be falling far short of the necessary support because of those 2 constraints. Luckily, in Japan, we don't have that constitutional constraint. And to the best of my knowledge, we don't have demand from the people to get a refund. Whatever we get through the carbon pricing mechanism, we can use 100% of the revenue on to help the energy transition. So that's the difference. And also, we talked about hollowing out, including the petrochemical industry. This is an issue which seems to be much more severe in Germany and EU because of various reasons. Carbon pricing is adding much more cost for the industry doing business here, and the disruption of natural gas from Russia is putting another pressure. So we are facing this hollowing out issue in Japan. We face the competition, but I think the situation in Germany may seem to be much more severe, and this is an issue that we don't have a conclusion or answer, but this is a issue in which we have to struggle and find a better solution. So it's not an advice, this is sharing our headaches.
Thank you very much, Terazawa-san. Thank you very much, Stefan. And I think, as you can tell from the last statements, you can tell that the discussions going on in the council sometimes are also quite controversial when it comes to sensitive topics. And now I would like to invite all of you to keep discussing, and we, as you see, have the chance to all the council, well, not all, but most of the council members from the Japanese and the German side are here, and we have a whole lot of expertise on various fields here together. And now, as I said, we would like to invite you to go outside and have a joint networking lunch and take the opportunity to approach the co-chairs, but also feel free to approach the other council members and ask them all kinds of questions on the energy transition or related topics from Japan or Germany. Thank you very much for your attention. And before I close, oh, sorry. I was about to show you the last slide where you can see also the email address once again. You're invited, of course, to also visit the website and take a look at the studies that have already been published. And it's also possible later on to take a look at the YouTube video. Thank you very much and have a nice afternoon.